What's up guys, this is No FUMAR, going to be coming at you with a $500 gaming PC build. I put this together over the weekend and I'd like to show it to you now. This is future-proof, it has a nice processor in it, and it has the upgradability to add more graphics cards in the future and upgrade it with a better processor however you see fit. So without further ado, let's get started with the build. So the processor we're going to be using for our build, which is going to pretty much make all our other decisions as far as motherboard and power supply and stuff like that. We're going to be using an Intel dual-core Pentium G3420, one with the 3420 as opposed to the 3220 because you get an extra 2.2 gigahertz, 200 megahertz. Probably math people, like myself. But anyway, you can't overclock it, no hyper-threading or turbo boost, so on that. But it's not going to bottleneck us for our graphics card or any gameplay or anything like that, so it's going to do surprisingly well. It only uses 54 watts, so we're not going to be getting any heat generation or anything like that. And it's actually not too expensive. It's only $75 on Newegg right now. I'm not surprised about that. It's not the greatest processor. It's also not an i3, so we're going to be saving some money there that we can spend on our graphics card. Remember, this is a $500 budget build. I know you can get AMDs and things like that, but quite frankly, I just like Intel. Now, this socket does, for this processor, the socket is required for an LGA 1150. So when we're choosing our motherboard, we're going to have to keep that in mind, and let's actually go ahead and start talking about our motherboard here real quick. So the motherboard that we're going to be using, which again, like we said, we need the LGA 1150 slot, we're going to be using an ASROCKI H81M. Now, when I was trying to find a motherboard, I was having some issues. This is a micro ATX motherboard. So I was having some issues where I couldn't find many motherboards that had front USB 3.0 port, like header ports, so that you could connect something to the front of your case with the USB 3.0. So this is the cheapest one that I could find for USB 3.0 with the front headers. So this has two memory slots with you can put in DDR3 up to 1600, which is what we're going to be using with max capacity of 16 gigabytes. We're only going to be putting in 8 gigabytes for right now. It comes with two SATA 3 gigabit a second ports and two SATA 6 gigabit a second ports. We're only going to be using one for the hard drive. However, if you wanted to later upgrade or something or use a solid-state drive, I'd highly recommend that. This does have turbo boost, but we can't use turbo boost with the Pentium, and we can't overclock, so we're just going to be sticking with a straight 3.2 gigahertz. It does have USB 2.0 and 3.0 on the back, and this motherboard is relatively inexpensive at only $60, so it definitely gets the job done for us, and has the nice micro ATX build, so we don't have lots of extra slots hanging around or something like that. As an added bonus, it does have two PCI 2.0 by 16 slots. So in the future, if you'd like to throw in another graphics card and then SLI it, since we'll be using NVIDIA, we'll be SLIing, you can definitely get some great performance boosts out of that. So highly recommend this motherboard. And now, obviously, the next thing we want to talk about for this is our graphics card. So the graphics card we're going to be using is, I had some, I was trying to decide, do I go in the GTX 700 series or the 600 series, and for a $500 build, I wound up choosing to go with a Gigabyte NVIDIA GeForce GTX 660. And this is a really nice graphics card. I really enjoy all the features. I've used it in a previous video for it was my $1,000 budget build, and I used the same graphics card. This has a nice core clock of 1033, and it does have some boost utilities inside it that you can use to boost it up to almost 1100 megahertz, and it's got 960 CUDA cores, and it can operate it up to 192 bits. It's got 2 gigabytes of GDDR5 memory. If you didn't understand any of that at all, I'm going to just low it down here and say you can play the games that have come out in the past 2 to 3 years. You can play those at ultra settings at 1080p, 60 frames a second. No issue whatsoever. Skyrim, Borderlands 2, games like that, Batman Arkham Origins, stuff like that. You're not going to have any problem playing those at ultra settings, 1080p, stuff like that. Games before that, you'll have no problem, no issue at all. Games that are starting to come out now that, maybe utilize 4 cores or something like that from the processor, maybe you have to turn it back to high settings, but I don't really think you'll have too much of an issue. And like I said, with our motherboard, we've got two PCI 2.0 slots, so slap another $180 down, SLI another one of these exact same cards in there, and you'll have no issue whatsoever. This graphics card right now you can actually get off Newegg. It's relatively inexpensive. It's only $190, so we weren't cutting too much corners here with a graphic card. Like, you want to make sure that you spend more money on your GPU and than your CPU when you're building a budget gaming rig. So I thought this was a relatively good graphics card. However, we can't spend all our time on that or discussing or, debating or stuff like that. So now we're going to quickly go through another couple components that we're going to throw into our build. We're going to talk about our RAM here next. So let's move on to our RAM. So our RAM, this is pretty much a no-brainer. We're not going to go too much into detail here. We're just going to be using G.Skill Ripjaws X series. We're going to be using 4 gigabytes at DDR3 1600. We're only going to be using 4 gigabytes because it does save us some money that we could spend on our graphics card there. As well as in the future, if you want to add another stick 4 gigabytes, go right ahead. It will cost you the same as it would have if you bought 2 4 gigabyte sticks. So on Newegg right now, this is relatively inexpensive. It only costs $38, so we're just going to slap that into our build. Not going to have too much to worry about. It's just memory. We don't have to go into too much detail. But now we're going to talk about the storage for our build. We're going to be using a Western Digital Caviar Blue. This is a 1 terabyte drive. It's really inexpensive, actually. It's not too bad. It's only $59.99, so $60 to get you 1 terabyte. Difference between 500 gigabytes and 1 terabyte really is almost non-existent. It's only like $5, so I'm not going to have too much of an issue. It's going to plug into one of our SATA 6 gigabit a second ports. So this drive fits nicely into our case, as well as it's a 7200 RPM hard drive. So we're not going to have too many issues. We're going to be able to store all our games, any footage we take, family photos, things like that. Stuff for all you sick people out there. I know what's going on. But anyway, after our hard drive, let's just throw in something that I like to include in all my builds, is a digital drive, just in case, you never know, your computer bricks or something, you need an operating system. Or you got an old game that you want to install. Like I've got plenty of old games here, like Age of Mythologies, Age of Empires, Backyard Baseball, Jumpstart Second Grade is a big one with me. But if you want to install any of those or something onto your computer, I highly recommend a DVD drive. So we're going to be including just a Samsung DVD drive. It's only $20 on Newegg, so it's really not too big of a deal. For $20 I'd include it, even if it takes us a little over $500. It's just a convenience. You never know when you're going to need it. So now we need to move on to something that's of great importance for our build, which is the power supply we're going to need to power all these lovely, happy, great things that we're throwing into our build. So let's talk about our power supply here real quick. So the power supply we're going to be using is a Corsair CX 430 bronze certified 80 plus. It's a 430 watt power supply. We definitely shouldn't cheap out on the quality of our power supply. For $45 off Newegg, you can get this. It is, like I said, an 80 plus bronze certified power supply. I highly recommend using a bronze certified power supply because, it's energy efficient. And most of the time, if they're bronze or platinum or silver or something, you can generally get a little more out of them as far as efficiency goes, so it's not like the minimum, for certification processes. But this is not a modular power supply, so it's got a bunch of cables, but we shouldn't have too much of an issue with cable management in our build. This will provide us more than enough power. If you wanted to SLI in the future with another graphics card, I don't think so, but you may need to upgrade to something like a 550 watt power supply, but I think this should get us more than enough power for our build, so I highly recommend it. Corsair CX 430 watt power supply. Now all this stuff needs its home, so we need to talk about the case that we're going to be putting everything into, so let's go ahead and talk about that case. So the case we're going to be using is a Cougar solution case. It is a mid ATX tower, so we're going to have no issue with our micro ATX motherboard fitting inside, as well as the graphics card. The hard drive has got plenty of hard drive bays, enough for expansion. Say if you want to throw an SSD in there, like I said, that's a good option. Throw in some weird cards, maybe like a capture card or something, you'll have no issue on the back with the ports. It does have USB 3.0 front port, 2.0 front port, and audio front port. And I'm not going to lie, I actually really like the aesthetics of this case. You'll see it here in a second, but I just think it looks really kind of cool. It's got a really nice design. It's got plenty of room for fans. It does come with one fan built into it. It's a 120 millimeter fan. Yeah, it's a 120 millimeter fan, and this is actually really inexpensive too. Surprising for the amount of options it gives us. It's only $40 on Newegg, so I highly recommend picking it up. It's going to do great with us, and that's pretty much the build. So let's just go here for a real quick second. We're going to wrap things up. Alright guys, so that pretty much wraps things up for the build. Our total in Newegg in my wish list comes to $527.72. However, your price may vary as much as $20 in either direction, especially if there's a rebate on something. If you do find a better graphics card, maybe some better RAM, bigger hard drive for a rebate, and you can get it right around these prices, I highly recommend opting for that. Like I said, one upgrade that I highly recommend is getting a solid state drive. I recommend either Samsung or Crucial. They're very good, reputable companies. However, there are new companies up and coming. There's like ASATA and Mushkin or something like that, and those do pretty good. I would get at least, if you can, something like 80 gigabytes or 120 gigabytes. That way you can store like your operating system on it. It'll increase your boot times very, very quickly, and you can load some programs really quickly as well as some games. The load times will increase, however the actual gameplay experience won't change. But anyway, so yeah, I really hope you enjoyed this build. Hope you learned some cool things about maybe new processor you've never heard of, or some different hardware, some different options. As an added bonus, I didn't talk about this in the graphics card, but your graphics card, if it's above a GTX 650 or higher, including 700 and 800 series if we ever get there, you get this really cool feature called Shadow Play, which allows you to pretty much have NVIDIA's version of Fraps on your computer, and it runs off your graphics card on a specified GPU part that basically makes it so you can record your gameplay. And it's really cool because it doesn't take all that much speed out of your gameplay. It really doesn't affect it all that much. And you can still record 1080p, and you can choose when to record, or you can have it go back and record old gameplay, up to 20 minutes, I think. So it's really, really cool. Highly recommend NVIDIA GTX cards, 650 or higher, which our card is. We have a 660. So anyway, guys, I really hope you enjoyed this build. I really enjoyed making it. So if you liked it, just make sure to leave a comment or something, a suggestion. Give me more build ideas. I really enjoy making these videos, so this is FUMAR signing off.